మంచిగా సార్ ఏంటి ఏంటి చాలా కొంచెం అలాగా ఉన్నాయి స్టార్ట్ చేసుకుంటా.
Dear students, today I would like to speak something about tumors of the ear. About 85% of these tumors, they appear in pinna mostly. And as far as the external auditory canal is concerned, it's about 5%. And the remaining 5% will be coming from the middle ear cavity. Now, what are the different tumors that we encounter in the auricle? They may be benign or malignant. The common benign tumor, we may find a preauricular cyst or a sinus. It is because of the improper fusion of the hillux of the first and second branchial arch, which result in the formation of preauricular sinus. If the opening of the sinus gets blocked, then it will result in a cyst. And obviously the treatment is excision in toto. You have to carefully excise the entire sinus. Otherwise, the condition is going to recur. If you don't treat it, it will get infected and the abscess cavity will burst open and starting infected material discharging from time to time and healing by an unsightly scar. To prevent all this, we have to excise. Next common thing we encounter is a sebaceous cyst. Sebaceous cyst in the auricle is like sebaceous cyst anywhere else in the body. It is because of the blockage of the sebaceous gland, opening of the sebaceous gland. What is sebaceous gland? It is nothing but modified sweat gland. So very classically, the sebaceous cyst will be very smooth and soft. There will be classical sign of sebaceous cyst, that is sign of molding. What is sign of molding? If you apply pressure or the sebaceous cyst, and there will be an indentation. And if you leave it, generally the indentation will go. But in case of sebaceous cyst, as there is sign of molding, the indentation will still persist even though you remove the pressure. Next is the dermoid cyst. Dermoid cyst we encounter in the lines of embryonal fusion. As a result, we may find the dermoid cyst in the preauricular region and also in the postauricular region also. So we have to thoroughly evaluate the extent of the dermoid cyst. Sometimes it will be very deep. So once you have confirmed the extent by means of imaging, either CT scan or MRI, we have to excise the entire dermoid cyst in toto. Next is the keloid. Keloid is nothing but a tumor from the fibrous tissue. Uncontrolled uncontrolled multiplication of the fibrous tissues resulting in the keloid formation. It is familiar in nature. It has got a notorious tendency in recurrence. And generally, above the orbitomeatal line, meatal line, the keloid formation is not known. Lobule is very, very famous for getting a keloid formation. So we should be very careful. Sometimes some individuals may be prone for this keloid formation. Once keloid formation occurs, there is very little that we can do. Even though we exercise, it is bound to recur. So if at all you exercise, you have to infiltrate steroid like triamcinolone locally to prevent recurrence. It is said once you see a keloid, you refer to your enemy. Next is hemangioma. What is hemangioma? Hemangioma is a tumor from the blood vessels. It may be a capillary hemangioma or a cavernous hemangioma. Capillary hemangioma, as the word implies, it is from the capillaries, and they are otherwise known as port vein strain hemangiomata. Generally, they do not regress on their own. They need surgical treatment, surgical excision. Whereas cavernous hemangioma, which are otherwise known as strawberry hemangiomas, they might regress on their own. Once the patient reaches an adult's life, they may recur. They may regress. You may find these hemangiomata elsewhere in the body also. Next, we come across papillomata. You may find a papilloma, which is nothing but a common wart caused by a papilloma virus. So, treatment is excision and cauterization of the base. And sometimes we may find what are known as cutaneous horns. These cutaneous horns, they are nothing but papillomata with keratin deposits. It will be very unsightly and hard, and it needs surgical excision. Another entity called keratoacanthoma. Keratoacanthoma is a benign tumor, as the word implies, but its picture appears like a malignant tumor, classically like a raised nodule with a central crater. So the treatment is excision. Next is neurofibroma. Neurofibroma, as the word implies, it is from the nerve cells. It may be a part and parcel of von Reckling-Hausen's disease, characterized by capsule-like spots and multiple in nature. It is common in children, and there may be bone deformities also. In contrast to NF2, we are very much interested as otolaryngologists because it manifests in the form of hearing loss. Our vestibular schwannoma is a part and parcel of NF2. They may be bilateral and multiple, and they may have tendency for recurrence. Whereas NF3, it is characterized by chronic pain throughout the body. So treatment of neurofibroma is excision. Now we'll go to malignant tumors. Most common malignant tumor is a squamous cell carcinoma. Most common area of the pinna that involves that is known to have squamous cell carcinoma is helix. And if the tumor is of considerable size, there may be a regional lymph nodal enlargement. If the lesions are small, you can always do a wedge resection and repair locally. If the lesion is large enough, you may have to do what is known as en-bloc resection. And coming to the other entity called basal cell carcinoma, otherwise known as rodent ulcer. A rodent ulcer, it can occur over the helix or tragus. It is very classically in the area that is exposed to the sun. So it is more common in men. If the lesion is small, you can do the irradiation, subject the individual for irradiation so that there won't be any cosmetic deformity also. But if it is larger enough, you will have to do a excision. Coming to the tumors of the external canal, we may have what is known as osteoma. Osteoma, it is generally from the cancellous bone and it is pedunculated. So the treatment is you have to excise the osteoma, you have to ooze out the osteoma. Sometimes you should be careful. Sometimes the osteoma may be extending deeper. It may be having connection with the seventh nerve. So you should be careful. So it is better to drill out the osteoma. Next is the exostosis. Exostosis are multiple bony swellings with a little irregular margin, irregular surface. They are multiple and sessile. It is very common in swimmers who swim in cold water. So the treatment is again excision. If we don't excise, they may produce hearing loss because they block the external canal. Next condition is a ceruminoma. Ceruminoma is from the ceruminous glands, which are nothing but modified sweat glands. They are smooth. Sometimes they may be malignant variety. So you have to excise them with a wide margin so that it doesn't recur. And occasionally we may find what are known as sebaceous adenoma, which with a smooth surface we can treat by surgical excision. Coming to the malignant tumors of the external canal, there may be squamous cell carcinoma, which is most important. In squamous cell carcinoma may be directly from the external canal, or it may be from the middle ear cavity. It may be extending from the middle ear cavity. Generally, these people will have long-standing ear discharge. It may be manifesting in the form of an ulcer or a polyp or a granuloma, a granulation-like lesion, and it may be associated with seventh nerve involvement. So the treatment is you have to do a minimum lateral temporal bone resection, with or without, followed by radiotherapy. Next entity is called basal cell carcinoma. The picture you see, it is a case of basal cell carcinoma. This lady came with this particular ulcer, huge ulcer at the costa of the pinna, and the treatment is a wide surgical excision. I had done a subtotal dissection or lateral temporal bone dissection of the particular ulcer, and I will show you. And occasionally we may see a malignant melanoma, which is extremely malignant, which is very rare. So the treatment is surgical excision followed by radiation and chemotherapy, and it has got a notorious tendency to metastasize. You may have to treat the metastatic lesions also by surgery. And this is the case of post-operative case. I have done a lateral temporal bone dissection by repair by the plastic surgeon by a trapezius flap. That means the flap, the skin flap, lined by skin flap, it is based on the trapezius muscle, which is locally available. Now we will go to tumors of the middle ear cavity and mastoid region. They may be primary tumors or secondary tumors. The primary tumors are, first and foremost, is the glomus tumor, benign tumor. Even though it is histologically benign, but it is clinically malignant in the sense that it will extend into the nearby structures and it will invade the cranial nerves. Multiple cranial pulses will be produced, and it is very aggressive tumor. It will bleed like anything, and it may, if it is not addressed properly, it can always recur. So all the characters of malignancy is there, but histologically it is benign. What is the other type of histologically benign tumor with malignant, clinically malignant tumor? Glomus jugular, apart from glomus jugular tumor, the other variety is classical nasopharyngeal angiofibroma, otherwise known as juvenile nasopharyngeal angiofibroma. It is also clinically, it is an angiofibroma. Clinically, it is malignant, but histologically, it is benign. Now, the malignant variety is, it may have carcinomata or a sarcomata, and the secondary variety of tumors, they may occur from the adjacent areas, like the parotid malignancy can come and invade the middle ear cavity and mastoid, or even the malignancy from the temporomandibular joint can extend. And sometimes you may find metastasis, very, very rare, from bronchus, breast, kidney, thyroid, prostate, and gastrointestinal tract. So this picture is a picture of a glomus tumor. You can see the tumor. Of course, it is post-embolization. We'll talk about it. So what is a glomus tumor? Glomus tumor is a tumor arising from non-chromaffin paraganglion cells over the jugular bulb or promontory. These non-chromaffin paraganglion cells, they are seen on the jugular bulb lesion classically, occasionally over the promontory also in relation to the Jacobson's nerve, which is a branch of the glossopharyngeal nerve. It is 5 times more common in women than men. It is more common between 40 to 50 years of age. Now, histologically, you may find sheets of epithelial cells. Yeah, you can see there will be sheets of epithelial cells with large nuclei, very classically. It is not malignancy. And you may find sinusoidal spaces with thin walls. That is why on minimal touch or manipulation, they readily bleed like anything. Very, very difficult to control. There should be never biopsy. For heaven's sake, no biopsy should be done. The diagnosis is made by the clinical features and the radiological features. And very, very rarely, in about 4% of cases, they metastasize into lungs, bones, and lymph nodes. Very rare. Now, what are the clinical features by means of which we can diagnose glomus tumor? First is the raging sun sign. Very classically, from the floor of the extraordinary canal, you will find pinkish discoloration like a sun. This is raging sun sign, which is characteristic of glomus jugular tumor. Next is a brown sign. You may find a pinkish swelling in just behind the tympanic membrane. If you apply Siegel's pneumatic orange speculum and apply little positive pressure, the pinkish mass will get blanched. It will become very pale. And if you leave the pressure again, then again it will come back to normal. This is classical brown sign, highly diagnostic of glomus jugular tumor. And as I have already mentioned, you will find profuse bleeding on touch. And once again, another classical sign is tinnitus. The tinnitus in glomus jugular tumor is described as pulsatile tinnitus. What is pulsatile tinnitus? The tinnitus which classically coordinating or occurring along with each pulse of the individual. Next, as there is a tumor in the middle ear cavity, space occupying lesion, you will expect deafness. If the tumor confines to the external canal and biliary cavity, there will be conduct deafness. But if it extends beyond, there may be mixed deafness. And the seventh nerve palsy is not uncommon. And when compared to squamous cell carcinoma, there will not be any ear pain. So this is a clinching point in the diagnosis of glomus jugular tumor. And occasionally you will find a bruit. You keep your stethoscope on the tumor, very classically you will hear the bruit. And the cranial palsies will be same. If the ninth nerve is involved, there will be parietal paralysis. And if the tongue is getting wasted on one side, it is because of the hypoglossal nerve paralysis. And sometimes you may find a vocal cord palsy because of the involvement of the vagus. And already mentioned about seventh nerve. So these are all the most common. Of course, there may be involvement of the accessory nerve also, wherein there will be failure of shocking of the shoulders. About 10% of these tumors are familial and 10% are multicentric. There may be another tumor elsewhere in the body, and about 10% are functional, that is, they produce catecholamines. Now, how will you confirm your diagnosis? Apart from the CT scan, you can always get this particular test that is called 24-hour vinyl mandelic acid estimation in the urine. The normal levels are 2 to 7 milligrams, whereas in case of this particular glomus jugular tumor, it is increased. And needless to say, CT scan of the head is will be clinching the diagnosis of the glomus jugular tumor. You can classically look for the septum in between the jugular foramen, that is jugular vein, and carotid artery, that is jugulo-carotid septum. If the jugulo-carotid septum gets destroyed, it is called Phelps sign, which is characteristic feature of glomus jugular tumor. If the jugulo-carotid septum is intact, still we can call it as glomus tympanica. It is confined to only tympanic cavity. MRI may be done for better understanding, and MR angiography, especially MR venography, is very, very helpful to know the extent of the tumor. And you can do a 4-vessel angiography. If you expect intracranial extension, you can know the intracranial extension, the vessels that are involved, the vessels that have to be embolized. Now, last but not the least, embolization. This embolization is a must for management of the glomus jugular tumor. If the tumor is very small, confined to the biliary cavity, you can carefully excise it by means of the modern gadgets like bipolar and all. But if the tumor is bigger in size, then you cannot take chances and you have to do an embolization. That is that therapeutic embolization. That is, you have to just 48 hours, 24 hours before surgery, the neuroradiologists, they inject the either gel foam particles or suitable agents into the vessel, that is the feeding vessel, to the tumor. As a result of it, the tumor will become like this, very, very pale and almost bloodless, and you can very comfortably excise the tumor. Once again, there should not be any biopsy. If you do a biopsy, it will give us torrential bleeding, very, very difficult to control the bleeding. Professor Hugo Fish has classified these tumors. Type A tumors, they are confined to the miliary cavity, they are called glomus tympanicum. Type B tumors, they are the tumors that is extending into the tympanomastoid area, whereas type C tumors, they extend into infralabyrinthine region and also into the gluteus apex. Type C1, it is involving the internal carotid artery with limited involvement, whereas in C2, the vertical portion of the internal carotid artery will be involved. In case of type C3, horizontal portion of the internal carotid artery is involved, whereas type D, it will denote intracranial extension. If the intracranial extension is less than 2 centimeters, it is D1. If it is more than 2 centimeters, it is D2. Now, how do we treat? Treatment is by surgery. Surgery always should be done with prior embolization, and sometimes it has to be followed by radiotherapy to prevent a residual lesion or a recurrent lesion. If the tumor is small, you can do what is known as extended facial recess approach. We will do mastectomy and we will open the facial recess. What is facial recess? Facial recess is the triangular space between the chorda tympani, facial nerve, and superiorly there will be short process of the incus. So in this region, we may have to drill carefully without injuring the facial nerve. This is the same recess we adopt for cochlear implantation surgery. The extended facial recess approach is we will sacrifice the chorda tympani nerve, and the approach is the axis is enhanced downwards so that we can access the entire tumor mass in the tympanic cavity, that is the enormous jugular tumor, and carefully excise it by bipolar arm. It's only helpful in case of small tumors, but if the tumor is a bigger one, then there is no other way except go for a infratemporal fossa A approach of, as described by Professor Dubofish. If the tumor extends beyond the jugular foramen, say for extending up to the foramen magnum, then you have to do a bigger procedure, that is transcondylar approach. This is a very early case which we have operated. This lady came with, somebody has done biopsy for this lady. There was torrential bleeding from the ear, and somehow with severe packing, the bleeding was able to be managed, and then I done excision by infratemporal fossa approach, and the patient was doing very well. About 20 years ago, she is lost for follow-up. This is the classical incision for the infratemporal fossa approach, that is lazy S incision. So by this incision, you have to excise the, you have to do a mastectomy, and you have to do a modified radical mastectomy, identify the facial nerve, and totally skeletonize the facial nerve, and you have to reposition it, transposition it anteriorly. If you identify the facial nerve and transpose it anteriorly, then you can drill very comfortably the entire medullary cavity right up to the jugular bulb. Once you identify the jugular bulb, identify the sigmoid sinus behind, you block the sigmoid sinus superiorly and identify the interjugular vein below and you ligate it. Now the sigmoid sinus and the interjugular vein, they are blocked superiorly, inferiorly. You can very safely open the jugular bulb and identify the tumor and excise it. This is the specimen which we have excised. Coming to the carcinoma of the medullary and mastoid region. To diagnose carcinoma of the medullary and mastoid region, one should have high index of suspicion. Whenever there is disproportionate signs, disproportionate hearing loss, or disproportionate vein, or disproportionate tumor or swelling, you have to suspect. It is common in between the ages of 40 to 60 years, and it is slightly more common in women, and it spreads anteriorly into the temporomandibular joint and also into the parotid gland and also into infratemporal fossa. Whereas if it extends medially, it extends into the petrous apex, and the dura is very resistant, but still sometimes it may invade the dura and extend into the brain. So patient may have blood-stained discharge, and pain is very, very significant, especially in the night times, and there may be seventh nerve paralysis. Once seventh nerve is paralyzed, that means the tumor has invaded the medial wall of the middle ear cavity. And very classically, you will see pinkish friable mass, which doesn't bleed much on biopsy, and you may have patient may have hearing loss and vertigo. So how do we diagnose? Diagnosis by means of biopsy, and you can subject the individual for CT scan and angiography to know the extent of the tumor, to do the staging of the tumor. Once you are convinced it is a stage 1 or stage 2 disease confined to the middle ear cavity, then you can do what is known as lateral temporal bone resection. That is the tumor just lateral to the that is the just medial to the tympanic membrane, we can excise. This is lateral temporal bone resection. This is the minimum surgery that can be done in case of the malignancy of the middle ear cavity, along with the resection of the mandible of the mandible and also superficial paratectomy. And you have to do a radical neck dissection if there is involvement of the lymph nodes. If the tumor extends beyond, then you have to do what is known as extended lateral temporal bone dissection, wherein we remove the cochlea also. Radiotherapy alone is not useful. These are the various levels which we used to describe before. This is partial temporal bone dissection, this is subtotal resection of the temporal bone, and this is total temporal bone dissection. Now the nomenclature is changed. Either it is a lateral temporal bone dissection, that is just lateral to the tympanic membrane, or it is extended lateral temporal bone dissection involving the entire ear along with the cochlea. Very rarely sarcomas we will see, especially rhabdomyosarcoma. Occasionally we encounter, entire career of me and mine, I've seen only one patient of rhabdomyosarcoma, which is a massive tumor, which is common in children. Generally arises from the embryonal muscles of the middle ear cavity. So treatment is a very, very aggressive tumor. Treatment is by means of radiotherapy and chemotherapy. In spite of everything, it carries a poor prognosis. Thank you.